Welcome back to the Keynote panel or fireside chat this afternoon, where two leaders, one in government and one in private enterprise, will kick off a discussion on collaboration for wins in cybersecurity and privacy. So Jonathan and Nick, welcome, and please take it away and enlighten us, please.
Well, thank you so much for having us. We'll be talking about some cyber defense operations and what that can mean for you. I'm Nick Rossman. I am the global lead for X-Force Threat Intelligence within IBM Security. My team is on the front lines with our incident responders, reverse engineering malware, tracking down the bad guys, writing strategic intel for our customers. I'm a former U.S. government analyst, previously worked at FireEye, and I've been leading the IBM team here for about 2 years. And now I'll kick it over to Jonathan.
Oh, you all started. I'll leave you alone. You all kicked off. That's awesome. Sorry to interrupt everybody.
That's great, Nick. Hi all. Thanks for having us. We are honored to be here today. My name is Jonathan Nunez. I am the commander of the California Cybersecurity Integration Center, otherwise known as the CalCIC, which is part of the California Office of Emergency Services. I have about 16 years experience in cyber operations stemming from the Air Force, where I started my career to building cyber defense practices and offerings at some of the larger cyber consultancies like Booz Allen, Deloitte, Accenture. Lastly, my career focuses have primarily been vested in refining the cyber defense process and also tool sets along to service those process, again, to better service the burgeoning market threats. Nick?
Jonathan, I'll kick it over first. What we're doing with our introductions today, talk a little bit about partnering effectively, some of the threat intelligence processes we've used, and also with attack surface reduction. So Jonathan, back to you to talk a little bit about the Cybersecurity Integration Center.
Thanks, Nick. So just a brief introduction as to who the CalCIC is. So we were established initially stood up in 2015 under Governor Brown here in California, furthermore to be codified into law in 2019. The legislation codifying us into law essentially charters us to be the central organizing hub of state government cybersecurity activities, with the primary mission set of reducing the likelihood and severity of cyber incidents that could damage California's economy, critical infrastructure, public and private sector networks. How do we do that? We do that primarily through information sharing with our state, local, tribal, and territorial partners, along with academic institutions and private and public non-academic institutions as well. We provide, to that effect, threat intelligence originating from CalCIC, as well as aggregation from our partners and open source, as we'll see later in the presentation. We assess risk on behalf of the state. We prioritize threats and also provide warnings and early warnings of cyber attacks in the state of California. Lastly, we also assist in developing cybersecurity strategy on behalf of the governor to supplement policies and procedures published by the likes of CDT, California Department of Technology, and others. Right, so why do we exist? So one of the things that we did when I first took position here is we took a regressive look at the most factual data set that we had, comprehensive factual data set we had of cybersecurity incidents in the state of California. And that exercise really was to quantify the level of effort required to really cover the state of California from a protective monitoring standpoint and also incident response standpoint. So we turned to the FBI's Internet Cybercrime Data Set, or IC3, and we did a poll and we took a number of measurements over a period of weeks. And the two measurements that stood out to us are here on the screen. And we'll start with the sort of bottom left. So in the 4 years between 2015 and 2019, there were almost 100,000 reported cyber incidents in the state of California. I'd like to give a little pause to that statement just so we can really quantify what that really means, in that not every organization has to, in fact, report to the FBI. So we almost are working under an assumption, a running assumption that actually this is a minority even yet. So out of the two statistics, the first one is 100,000 cybersecurity incidents reported, and those were reported into essentially 5 high-level categories. The first is personal data breach. So, things like PII loss or personally identifiable information loss. So in the event of a data breach, we may find, as an example, a date of birth tied to a name, tied to an address, or as an example, a social security number. Second one is social media. So things that we're seeing today, like Twitter account hijacks, which is becoming very common and prevalent as we lead up to the general elections nationwide. Third is harassment and threat of violence. Fourth is phishing. And fifth is business email compromise, which leads me into the second statistic in the top right. And really what that tells us is that the financial loss from these compromises reported to be over $1 billion. Again, just the state of California, just the compromises in question. With BEC, business email compromise, actually topping the list at over $693 million in losses. And lastly, and a third interesting point is that after looking at how the incidents have trended, we've actually forecasted, based on that trend data, a 20% year-on-year increase in the number of cyber incidents we're to expect. And what that really means is that by 2020, end of 2020, we're on track to already closing out close to 30,000 incidents. And if we follow that 20% year-on-year trajectory, by 2023, we'll be at an expected almost 55,000 incidents worked. Next slide, please. Thank you. So how do we do this? Well, we really leverage our strategic partnerships, and I'll touch on this, and it'll be thematic through the presentation from CalSIC. Because we are chartered to provide services, legislatively bound to provide services to state entities, local entities, tribal, territorial, and the private and public sectors both. That's a monumental task, right? California is the 5th largest economy. We have 39.6 million people, 116 school districts, 58 counties, and the statistics go on as to, how do we really even A, start to quantify the threat, and B, start to talk about a strategy for how to actually move the needle in reducing that aperture, right? Or reducing the threat or the risk to the state or the governor. And it's through our partnerships. And on the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see some of the emblems and some of the agency names spelled out. And that list is really growing. We work every day, every week to onboard different partners and agencies. And we do that really, again, to provide services like incident response, where if we at headquarters are co-located in Sacramento, if there is an issue, as an example, in Los Angeles County, we have those partners that are already located there that we can leverage to then to action that support request. Some of the criteria that we leverage here within the CalSIC to identify or help us identify who to reach out to, when, why, and where is legal responsibility. So, the state of California, for those entities that are governed by the state, so like state agencies as an example, they will have sort of the legal responsibilities or precedents to action a threat in a certain way, depending on how the statute is governed. As an example, to that effect, if we were to respond to if we were to respond to a cyber attack at a state agency, then we would then leverage our California Highway Patrol partnership to be able to take primacy on that investigation or legal responsibility for that investigation in the event there is a criminal nexus. And so all of our partnerships follow the same sort of conditions where there is a legal precedent, and then we leverage that precedence to provide support services. Third area is area responsibility, and we briefly touched on that. So again, California is a massive state in terms of landmass, and we here in Sacramento are sort of at the heart of it. But in order to very quickly be able to respond on behalf of the Office of Emergency Services to attacks, we really do look for supporting partnerships in areas of the state where we just don't have easy access to. And then the last item there for support criteria is skill set. So, we know that in the cyber world, it's skill sets are some skill sets are hard to come by. As an example, digital forensics is not a very common skill set, and so we really do look for all of our partners, even our critical infrastructure partners that have specialties in certain areas. We will partner with them to bring in that expertise and also exchange our cyber expertise with them. And so that is a core component of what we do in order for us to be able to service our community better. In 2019, I put up some metrics on this slide just to sort of illustrate what kind of community impact we had last year. So we worked 620 incidents last year. We wrote 288 early warnings in a variety of formats. And to date, we have just over 1,000 information sharing partners. Those partners are effectively partners that we have that have enrolled with the CalSIC to receive threat intelligence and risk assessment updates with us. And we have an enrollment process where we can bring you into the fold and then provide that information to you. The type of support services that we deliver here are incident response. We briefly touched on that. Vulnerability assessment, I'll briefly touch on that later on in the presentation. Digital forensic services, and we do that through CHP as mentioned. We also have FBI contacts as well that can provide those services if the legal precedents were there. Criminal prosecution, again, we leverage our federal and state partners that are deputized to be able to provide that service outward. Security training and awareness. So this is the big one for us as we lead up to key events such as general elections, or as we see threats trending in the state, such as phishing, which is always trending, or ransomware, or we see a threat actor becoming very prevalent in the state or within our threat landscape. We'll actually put together security training and awareness and deliver it to the parties effectively that we think matter to the threat. So an example could be every month we hold a monthly threat brief where we pick a topical area. In August, we picked education as we learned that students were coming back online into school, teleschooling, and so we provided a brief to that effect to the entire educational community in California. As we approach the elections, we've done the same. And so every month we pick a topic and then we build out a threat brief. So we identify what that threat landscape is, we provide recommendations, and then we partner with other agencies to come in on that briefing and provide their expertise. And then we deliver that out to the community. And then last on the list here is information sharing and threat intelligence exchange. So this is one of our bread and butter services that we offer here. And it's really bringing in all of the intelligence that A, we can harvest from the community, B, originate from our investigations, and C, contextualize amongst the other agencies and everything else we're seeing in California and bring the best actionable intelligence to bear. And then we do that through a variety of means, and I'll touch on that a bit briefly later. Next slide.
Jonathan, I think what's been interesting just sitting from the private sector side is seeing how forward-leaning California has been to set up partnerships like this, and I think really leading the way. And where it's been beneficial, I think, is seeing how the states have used their law enforcement authorities and those relationships they've built since the 2000s and continue to really drive it on the cyber threat that we're facing. One area we were able to gratefully work on with the city of Los Angeles and with the Los Angeles Cyber Lab was creating an enterprise sharing environment for the city of LA and a variety of agencies and private sector companies as well to be able to share cyber threat information. And it really started with the basics on phishing emails and being able to exchange that information. So whether you were the water authority in LA County, whether you were a private sector entity in the entertainment industry, you could get feedback on some of the phishing emails that you were seeing, and the group could start to correlate that activity. We did that with a partnership with one of our intelligence management providers that works off of AWS. In addition to that, our team at IBM was able to share some of our threat information as a part of that regular exchange. I think it's almost like an only in California in a way that this has worked and really driven the funding for this overall that we've seen in the past couple of years. Jonathan, one question for you, if you don't mind, in talking about the threat. You mentioned just going to some of your other slides about, ransomware in particular being relatively low. Have you seen a growth in that area for the IBM team? I mean, we continue to see it be about 25 to 30% of the incidents that we're involved in. Is that the same with you? I think I'll just keep kicking it over to Jonathan on the CalSec threat intelligence sharing stack.
Thanks, Nick. So I just want to very quickly touch on CalSec threat intelligence and kind of what that looks like. In the last slide that I read out, I did mention that one of our bread and butters was in fact threat intelligence. So I thought it'd be prudent just to give the audience a view here. So I guess the first point here is that the CalSec has probably close to 100 threat intelligence feeds that we're bringing in amongst the 4 sources that you see here: open, closed, internal, and also our community. Under the open source, it's effectively our aggregation function within our cyber threat intelligence branch, where we're going out onto the internet and we're pulling in what the community sees as bad, and we bring that in through our threat intelligence platform, or TIP, that we have, which is Threat Connect for us here. And we effectively contextualize the threat intelligence. We enrich it with all the other data sources we have, and then we can feed that back out to the community. Our closed sources are effectively the sources that we pay for, and again are closed for a variety of reasons, either because they are commercial products or there's increased sensitivity as to how we get those sources of information. So those are closed. And then internal are effectively, network communications that we're seeing as an example from either our partner agencies at the Department of Technology or entities in the community that have signed agreements with us to become a partner, and then we'll ingest their data, and then we'll also can give them back threat intelligence. So we don't just aggregate and farm out threat intelligence. That is a critical function of what we do here. But also, if you enroll with us, then we'll actually go through an exercise where we take your priority intelligence requirements and we do a collection plan for you to then be tasked into the system for curated intelligence products, right? So there's a difference there. And then I guess fourth on the menu here is community. And what this really means is our partners that enroll with us and want to engage in a strategic relationship rather than sort of a tactical operational relationship, we can come up with creative ways to be able to ingest, monitor, and feedback information to you, whether that's you have an Albert sensor or you're an MSISAC partner, and we can dial into that through the ways that we can and provide you additional resource and effort in working on the alerts, or we can partner together to deliver you a network appliance where, okay, now we have some monitoring happening in your network, and we can use that appliance to then deliver threat intelligence into you as well. So it isn't just the automated threat collection or the enrichment or the contextualization, but it's also working through some of the more difficult problems that you may face as an entity. And maybe it's your technology stack, maybe it's the fact that you're in transition, between managed security service providers. It could be any of the reasons, and we see many of them. We can help service those, and we do so. One of the ways we do so is through this platform. And to the right of this stack, you'll see 4 examples or exemplars of our report, and these are our templates. But effectively, through this process, we can issue you one of 4 of these kinds of reports. A cyber advisory is a report that we issue which has a sort of immediate precedence to it, right? There's an immediate action required. There's a 10 out of 10 common vulnerability that's been issued, or we see beaconing coming from your network, or effectively it requires immediate attention, and so we tag it as a cyber advisory. Second is cyber assessment. So when I introduced CalSIC in the legislation and kind of what we're responsible for, assess risk was one of those items on there. And this is our product that will give us that risk assessment outward to the customer. And the risk assessment can come in many different ways. It can be a vulnerability assessment. It can be an attack surface reduction work stream, or an external compromise assessment, internal compromise assessment, or another strategic intelligence view. We have partners that come to us and say, you know, as an example, right, we have budget change control coming up, and we understand that we're underserved in that capacity. Can you come and do an assessment and help work with our executive tier to sort of direct budget into that effect? So that's one product that we can use for that as an example. Cyber bulletin. So cyber bulletins are more us trying to communicate with our community about threats that we're seeing that should be generally made aware of throughout a community. So less about targeted to an entity and having the entity take an action, and more as an awareness function that this threat is coming, this threat is looking, this is what it looks and feels like. These are the kinds of things you can do in the event you do see it in your network. And then executive overviews. So this is just an executive overview we can produce as a result of any of the other reports. And again, this is for your C-level as well, and we produce that in-house. Next slide, please. Thank you. So attack surface reduction, you know, what is that? And this is a relatively newer concept of service that we deliver here in the CalSIC, and how it started was through the vulnerability analysis work stream, which we're likely all familiar with, where, you know, we scan the network, an entity's network, internal or external, and we produce a list of vulnerabilities, and we'll categorize and we order, and we do some sort of prioritization, and then give that back out to the entity for remediation. When I say we, what I really mean is we coordinate with the California Military Department to deliver this service. And that's how it sort of started, and it evolved into what you'll see here just in a moment with our COPS use case. But effectively, attack surface reduction is the evolution of our vulnerability analysis framework, in that what we really noticed was, yes, entities need to be compliant. Yes, vulnerability assessments need to happen. However, they don't always move the needle in terms of lowering your risk and increasing your security, or your security posture. The two aren't mutually exclusive. And so what we thought was, actually, why don't we take the view of an attacker on this exercise? So let's map the attack surface. Let's bring all that data back, so we're not even looking internally anymore. We're just looking externally, because we want to really narrow the aperture for that initial infection vector. So we want to be able to capture what an attacker would see and what they would use to build an op plan or an operational plan to attack your network. We effectively do the same thing and then report back to the entity. This is the likelihood that you would be compromised. This is a threat. Perhaps there's some intelligence about that threat that we've been able to gather, illuminating us to the fact that they may be actually attempting to do this. And then we're going to present to you, this is what your attack surface looks like. This is exactly your network that's out there on the internet. These are the vulnerabilities associated with it. And actually, of all of these vulnerabilities, these are the ones that you should be worried about, because you are under imminent threat. And that's effectively what we do. And we do that through a data collection effort. We can do that internally or externally to your network. As I mentioned, if we do it externally to your network, it's completely passive. It is not an active scan. If it's internal to your network, then we will bring in Nessus and do an active scan. If it's external to your network, then it's a no-touch passive scan that we can do using tooling and process that we have internal here. Second step is analysis and investigation. So we bring all that data in, and we sort of do an assessment of what the most critical items are, right? So you know, of the 10,000, 5,000, 80,000, you know, vulnerabilities we might see, 1,000, right? What really makes sense to report? And part of that is understanding the asset. Part of that is understanding a bit of the architecture, understanding context of the entity. And also understanding the threat, right? What is the threat likely going to go after if they're targeting an organization? And is there some sort of alignment there? All of those things come together to produce a likelihood. And all of that sort of happens at that analysis and investigation. Once we have that telemetry, and once that telemetry is enriched and we have the contextual evidence coming in from the rest of the state, we're able to make an assessment to say, actually, this is what your current risk is. And then thirdly, reporting and scorecards. So how do we actually get all of this data together and report it out effectively? And part of that is, yes, there's going to be a technical summary. Yes, the raw data is going to be there. Yes, we have all of our materials referenced and baseline with standards and best practices. Yes, there's going to be an executive summary. But we also walk the entity through all that. So what does it all mean? How do you read it? How does this translate out? What's the bottom line up front? And so we do that as well. And then the last piece there, the cybersecurity risk management, is really us helping the customer sort of bootstrap the remediation process. And we say that because a lot of our work today on the incident response front, on the assessment front, is really spent down at the county layer and below. So we're talking municipalities, counties, cities, as the state is already covered very much by California Department of Technology by statute. And so what we find down at the county is that actually, they're understaffed, they're underserved from a security perspective, and all the things that we know about cybersecurity today applies to the counties. It's decentralized, et cetera. So how do we work together to bring the state resources together into one place to really help move the needle to those counties that have 4 IT staff and they don't have the expertise, they don't have the tooling? How do we come to them and provide them with a solution? And so that's what that's part of. So maybe just to recap on this slide a little bit. So it's really a 4-step process for our attack surface reduction with the goal of narrowing the aperture for the attacker. And the first is, again, active passive collection. You have an option there. Our recommendation, if we're going to do this exercise, is to do passive collection because you really want to see what the attacker can see. Second is weighting based on likelihood of compromise. And really that's a join up between discoverability and then attractiveness for the attacker. So yes, the asset must be discoverable, right? Because they have to know about it and they have to discover it. So we have to do the same. We have to know about it, we have to discover it, which is also part of the reason why we like the black box or the passive collection, because we actually at that point don't even ask you any details about your technical infrastructure. We just go and we find it just like an attacker would. And then attractiveness is the likelihood that an attacker would even go after it. So does the asset, connect into the rest of the environment? Is the exploit in question, compatible with the kit that the attacker is trying to drop? Is it in line with the tactic the attacker is known to do? So all of these questions sort of come into the attractiveness bucket, and the two together give us a weight score. That weight score then feeds up into a notable that we produce a report on. The third item here is alerting and recommendations. And again, that's part of the aggregation into that report, that readout for you. And then coordination for remediation. And again, that's us being able to hand the baton off to the entity and really work through some of these issues. And then again, the issues that need a heavier lift than what we can provide, since we, the CalSIC, are a no-cost community service. The services that we cannot provide because of resourcing and the like, we have partnerships within the state that we can deliver nearly anything IT related or security related into your environment. So, and we'll follow that process along in the event of a handoff as well. So you don't lose us for good, we just do handoff. Next slide, please.
Hey, Jonathan, we're coming up here on time. I'm hoping you can see the question in the chat there. It was a question about, is Intel sharing available for small and medium-sized businesses?
Understood. I think we have about 30 seconds left. I'll pause for any questions.
I think with some audio issues, we'll just need to wrap today. Thank you for everyone for having us. It's been exciting to be with you, and want to thank the organizers again. IBM's proud to be a part of this. So turning it back over to the team.
Thank you so very much, Nick and Jonathan. You guys like a pro. Probably our audience did not even know that, Jonathan, you could not hear us at all, but you worked seamlessly together. So go the collaboration spirit